Let's talk about America before America.
What do you mean?
We all should know by now this land mass originally thrived with the African and Australoid known by many different tribes and names, such as Olmec, Mayan, Aztec, Mocaya, and the Pygmy properly known as the TWA people.
Well, what is the reason for America's advance?
Simply put, trade. The molasses trade, to be exact, a pro-American bulletin of 1731 said the molasses trade is the most, if not the only, valuable commodity of England, and John Adams, our second president, said, "I know not why we should blush to confess that molasses was an essential ingredient in America's independence."
Why molasses?
Molasses meant rum, and rum was exchanged for the exchange of Africans on the African west coast. In short, it was the sale of Africans in the New World in the slave trade that laid the financial foundation of the USA, will lead up to the trade of rum and molasses. England, with Sir John Hawkins 1532 to 1595, who had taken the lead in the slave trade. The Royal African Company had the monopoly, but it was unable to supply the demand, and Parliament ordered the trade open to all British ships for the whale supplying of the plantations and colonies with sufficient numbers of Negroes at reasonable prices. New England, who inherited the maritime spirit of their motherland, entered the trade with zest and soon became rivals of English merchants. They discovered molasses. The best article for making rum was either being fed to hogs or thrown away in the French sugar island of the Caribbean, and therefore could be had at very cheap prices. The molasses trade in rum gave incentive to other New England industries, such as distilling, fishing, shipbuilding, lumber, and horse and cattle rearing. In 1708, Governor Cranston of Rhode Island reported that his colony had built 103 ships since 1698, and in 1749 Boston had 469 ships tied to the slave trade.
So thanks to Rome and the slave trade, New England became commercially dominant in the New World, not only dominating the Caribbean trade, but also Virginia, Carolinas, and the rest of the South, and had very few slaves herself. In 1776, the new 6 England colonies had only 1,600 slaves compared with nearly 300,000 in Virginia alone. New England made white servants who are semi-slaves more profitable.
Let's get a closer look at the routine. New England ships with their cargo of rum sailed to West Africa, where they exchanged it for slaves and such articles they could pick up as gold, dust, and ivory, then to the West Indies, where they disposed of them at a high profit. Then they returned with molasses for more rum. Then to Africa. This was known as the triangular or three-corner trade. New England made better rum, so it cheaper, and pushed it so emphatically that it replaced English rum and French brandy. New England's success galled not only the slave trading moguls of Bristol and Liverpool, but the British government itself.
In 1733, Parliament passed the Molasses Act, placing a duty of 30 cents a gallon of imported molasses, or about a half as much as the purchase price. But that wasn't all. Molasses of the British West Indies was already 20 cents a gallon more precious than the French one, and to make it worse, there was an export duty on the British molasses, meaning the cost of molasses to the Americans would be double what they've been paying. Let's take a minute to really look into what we have been taught as the slaves.
Negroes, or black peoples, bought white people in America. As early as the 1640s, the U.S. Guide to Virginia says, in the 17th century in Virginia, Negroes used to import white servants and received head rights to land. As early as the 5th century AD, whites were sold as slaves in Greece and Rome. The laboring element existed. Even their scholars, overseers, were slaves. St. Jerome 340 to 420 even wrote himself, "Who would have believed that the daughters of the mighty city of Rome would one day be wandering as servants and slaves on the shores of Africa?"
Wow, I didn't know that. What else can be said about the slave?
Well, let's look at the word slave. The word slave itself was first used for guess who white people. It comes from the word Slav, which means a blonde-haired, blue-eyed people who were captured by the Germans and reduced to servitude. Slav originally meant people of glory. In the book Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, it says, "From the Euxine to the Adriatic in the state of captives or subjects the Slavs overspray the land, and their name was degraded from the signification of glory to that of servitude." When one encounters slave in French, it means female slave. The earliest title of persons in servitude is serf. While Europeans and white Americans were raiding Africa for slaves, Africans were raiding the coast of Europe as far north as Sweden and Finland for slaves. I've been doing this for centuries. The first slaves in the United States were the white Englishmen. The first 100 arrived in 1617 to 1619, and were sold white slave who ran away were advertised in the newspaper if they were branded with the letter R for runaway.
Yes, I remember a little bit of this history. I also remember that the first pilgrims and the first white slaves were nothing but convicts, heathens, criminals, lazy, and filthy people is starting to make sense now.
Yes, I'm glad you know this. Also, the first Africans in America were not slaves, and chattel slavery of them did not start until 1659 to 1682, according to competent research such as J.H. Russell or M.P. Andrews or Mary Standard or Helen Carroll. The slaves for life were white convicts who were shipped from Europe. There were no prisons in that part of Africa from which blacks came, and no convicts were among them. J.H. Russell, a white doctor, said in the book Free Negro in Virginia that indeed, for more than 20 years after the Negro first appeared in court, there was no restriction upon their rights to own white indentured servants. That these first Negroes could buy white people shows that in the earliest America, there was no bias and only equal treatment for white and blacks, according to class.
So when did color become a big deal?
The first recorded instance, according to research, is in India, approximately 5,000 years ago, when the Aryan invaded the Indus Valley and found black people. They are known as the Dacius.
Love and less built.